Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Horror Realm. I'm Travis Bruce, and today I have with us a special guest. He's an author, and he has a forthcoming novella called TELEPORTASM, which is the third entry in the Shortwave Killer VHS series. I have with us the author, Joshua Millican. Joshua, welcome to the Horror Realm.
Thank you so much for having me, Travis. I've enjoyed watching your recent episodes, and it's a real honor to be on your show.
Man, listen, it's a pleasure having you on, man. I mean, listen, we're going to go into your history and everything, but I'm glad that you're a fan of my show as well, man.
Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about TELEPORTASM.
Sure. In TELEPORTASM, four friends unearth a unique VHS tape that, when viewed, causes short-distance teleportation with euphoric after effects. No one knows where this tape comes from or what the long-term consequences will be, but some will risk everything for just one more trip.
Interesting. So, all right, let me jump into this. So, where are they teleporting to?
They're actually only teleporting 6 feet due north.
Really?
Yeah. So, it's really pretty instantaneous. They teleport, there's a little puff of blue and purple smoke, and then they're 6 feet due north across the room. The big innovation to the teleportation concept that I've introduced here is the fact that it feels really good. So you got to imagine like the folks on the Starship Enterprise getting, teleported to their destination, and the first thing they do is they'd be like, "Oh man, that felt so fucking good." So, just the idea that having your being broken apart at the molecular level and metaphysically transported is just a really pleasurable experience.
Interesting, man. Because listen, so like when people ask me what kind of superpower would I love to have, and I always say teleportation. And that throws those people
like Nightcrawler or something, right?
Yes, because I mean, I don't travel as much, but I used to travel all across the world, right? And like the worst part about it is the getting there. You know what I mean? And once you get there, it's fucking awesome. But the getting there, the long flights, they have to deal with TSA.
I feel the same way. I used to be totally afraid of airplanes, and I used to think the same thing, that it would just be so great. I couldn't wait for them to invent those transporters from Star Trek. I was all for it.
Yes, and like if I could invent that, I mean, if anybody could come up with that fucking idea, I mean, is that not the most powerful person in the world?
Pretty much. And, there are people in the saga of TELEPORTASM who do seek to, harness this unusual power. And just to back up a second, if I may, I want to give a shout out to the OG teleportation horror story, which isn't, something that's, a written book per se. I'm talking about the Philadelphia experiment, the urban legend about the USS Eldridge, an invisibility experiment that actually teleported it, a few hundred miles away and then teleported it back. And the frightening thing about that everyone thinks of when they think about the Philadelphia experiment is some of the sailors were fused into the walls and the floors and the bulkheads. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes. 100%.
So, it was kind of like I was taking that desire to teleport that you're talking about, like, yeah, this would be great. And then I was reminding people, that this is a very fragile technology that, potentially you shouldn't be fucking with.
Exactly, man. Now, all right, so what gave you the inspiration for this series?
Well, I actually got sort of grandfathered into the series. Mine is book 3 of the Killer VHS franchise. Book 2 was written by Brian McCauley, Candy Cane Kills. It's excellent Killer VHS novella, as is Melonhead Mayhem, the very first one. Brian McCauley and I were both members of the Los Angeles chapter of the Horror Writers Association. We went to the same meeting a few years ago when we had both just released our first novels. I'm like, hey, what are you working on? I'm working on the Killer VHS series, it's blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I heard of that. And then I was like, man, I would love to get on board with that. And he said, all right, hit up Alan. So I just came up with a pitch because I didn't even have a manuscript yet. But I was totally inspired by the fact that this Killer VHS series existed. And I wanted to be a part of it. And I wanted to take the concept of a killer VHS tape kind of literally the way they do in The Ring, except not with a curse, not with something supernatural. And when I pitched it to Alan Listufka, who's the head of Shortwave, it's kind of a one-man operation. He does a million great things. He's a super talented guy. But when I pitched it to him, I was all, think of this as Hellraiser by way of the Philadelphia experiment, where the tape is the lament configuration. And that's not really an accurate description of what TELEPORTASM evolved into, but, there are still a few of those elements that made it through into the final product.
Now, like you were saying about the actual teleportation in TELEPORTASM, it's almost like an orgasmic feel. It's almost like it's almost like a fucking high.
Yeah, and basically no one can resist it afterwards. There are a few people, I guess, who can see it and be like, wow, that was amazing, but, and then go on with their lives. But most people who experience it, you become slightly obsessed, usually more so.
It's absolutely crazy. So today, during my real job, right, my full-time job, I was walking around with a client, and I live in Baltimore, and in Maryland, DC, marijuana is 100% legal, just like
fantastic.
California, right?
Yeah.
But it's only been legal for, I think it's been a year now. It's been almost a year now. But you cannot walk around.
It's been legal in California for so long, I forget it's illegal other places. I was in Texas with some friends of mine for South by Southwest a few years ago. I, took out my pipe. It was like a festival atmosphere. They're like, what are you doing, dude? This is Texas. I'm like, I totally forgot.
And I can spend, for years, I've spent a lot of time in California, San Diego, Los Angeles, as well as Colorado, right?
So
so I know that, like, once you hop off that airport, the smell of fucking marijuana and cannabis hits you right in the fucking, it's like, boom.
Yeah, man. Yeah, if this stream was conveying scents, you would get that cannabis.
I got it
right now, just wafting off of me. I think you technically get a contact high just standing next to me.
Yeah. So one of my jobs is I'm a construction project manager, right?
Nice.
So I'm taking so we're working on this project as a flip for a customer, and the smell of marijuana is coming through the fucking house, right? And the customer looks and is like, whoo! I every time I come to, I think they live in Virginia. I don't think it's legal in Virginia. They were like, whoo! Every time I come to Baltimore, like, I forget that it's legal here because the smell. And then she hit me with the story about the first time that she did cannabis, and it was like 5 years ago, and her experience. And then I told her about, this is a weird conversation to have with a customer.
Right.
I told her about mine, and I was like, my first one was in Amsterdam, believe it or not. Of all different places, my first.
My God, that's like the cannabis mecca. That's so awesome. What year did you go?
This was back in, it had to be 2013 or 14.
That's amazing.
I didn't even smoke it. They have, I don't know if you've been to Amsterdam before.
No, it's like, to tell you the truth, it was like it was like the thing I wanted to go, my bucket list, and ever since it's been marijuana's been legal in California, I haven't felt the need to go that far.
Oh no, listen, it's a whole different fucking experience. It's a whole different experience. Because listen, so my first experience, they got this it looks like literally like a telephone booth. And you stand in there and they lock you in, and it seals, vacuum seals, and then they drop this fucking smoke down in there. And I'm telling you right now, man, I'm not saying I've been chasing that high, but I've never been that high in my life. Like,
you're kind of blowing my mind. I didn't know that sort of thing existed. Are you saying that you could go to Amsterdam and stand in like the equivalent of a telepod and just get blasted with THC?
They get fucking blasted. They got the cafes. I mean, there is the cannabis and marijuana is so ingrained in their culture. It's insane.
Are you lying to me? Because that just, my mind is
dead serious. I'm being dead serious, man. I'm being dead serious. But listen, I can tell you.
I haven't seen that in California, man. Someone needs to get on that ASAP. I'll be lining up.
But like Amsterdam is like the most amazing fucking place, just not on the cannabis level. I know we're going way off, but this is what I do in my interviews.
Let's do it.
But women outnumber men there like by a large amount, right? So like the women there are super fucking thirsty, and they're tall and gorgeous, and like it's not the I'm giving myself trouble, but it's not the place like that. I don't know why like they have the red light district. I don't even know why guys pay for it there because it's so easily available, and like
Hey,
you don't
I'm a
even
married
have
man.
but you don't even have to like. You don't have to make the first move. But you don't even have to make the first move. Like they make the move and initiate everything. And it was kind of, in the time I went with my girlfriend at the time. And I was like, son of a bitch. I brought sand to the beach. Like, how come this wasn't a trip that I didn't take when I was single? Like, you know what I mean? Like, this would have been an amazing trip. It was still a fun trip. It was still a fun trip. But I was like, wow. Who knew?
Man. I'm past those 20s, early 30s. I'm a family man now. So it sounds like that experience is something that will always just have to be something I experience vicariously. But I am going to Amsterdam just for these teleportation booths that blast you with cannabis.
Oh my goodness!
You stepped out and thought you were in another world.
Like they even have like these gas mask like things you can do. Like it looks
they
like
have similar things. I've seen those here.
They do.
Yeah, I've seen those gas masks, but not a chamber.
Yeah, they got the chambers, got the gas masks. I mean, they got all kinds of. Listen, I mean, it's the place. It's the place. If you're like a marijuana fan, I've never been to Jamaica, but I've heard that Jamaica is big, but Jamaica is also dangerous. But
and you got to worry about hurricanes when you go to Jamaica too. But I would love to go to Jamaica just because I'm like spiritual, not religious, and I feel like there definitely is a spiritual aspect to cannabis. It's a lot of fun, but there's definitely something about it. Just to get real for a second, Cheech and Chong kind of like cemented this stoner persona that's stuck throughout the generations, and it's fine. I love it. I love Tommy Chong and Cheech Marin. I think they're talented guys. But before that, the stereotypical stoner was like a rabble rouser. He was anti establishment, and he was also very artistic, and he had a mind that could think on several levels. More of like a sage sort of thing. And I think in Jamaica, it's still respected like that, as part of ritual and ceremony and things like that. And I'd like to go someplace where, the kind of like the giggling, passing out dude isn't the stereotype, where it's more like the, coming together with music and family and culture.
I agree. And that's something that you're going to experience in Amsterdam. Yes, you do have a lot of American tourists that's going there and giggling, but for the most part, it is part of the culture. I mean, it's the cafes, it's the food, everything's infused with, which I see now a lot more with California and Colorado.
Oh, yeah.
Food is infused with cannabis.
Everything. Cheech and Chong, speaking of Cheech and Chong, they got CBD drinks in every liquor store now. I absolutely love it. And I love cannabis culture. I'm just pointing out that it's much bigger than just the Cheech and Chong stereotype, which is the one that really sticks. Even now that it's evolving, and obviously I love cannabis culture because, I think the reason we're having this conversation is because the main characters in my book are all, what we would call stoners, and they call themselves stoners, and I call them stoners. There's really nothing wrong with that, as long as you're, reclaiming that word, and they're kind of your stereotypical stoners when you first meet them, but the longer you know them, I think the more compelling they become. So while it is a funny portrayal of stoners or cannabis aficionados, I like to think it's a real portrayal of people who just enjoy that cannabis California lifestyle.
Yes, most definitely. And speaking about the teleportation thing, and even marijuana and also as well, but like, I just feel like as us as humans, we look. Listen, shit sucks. Life is great, but shit does suck. There's just stress. There's expectations put on us, and I think we all do chase that euphoria feel, whether it be sex, whether it be cannabis, whether it be whatever. So, like, the fact that teleportation is giving the characters this feeling, this orgasm almost feeling. It's amazing.
Well, yeah, and you really bring a perfect segue into another thing. Absolutely, there is a addiction metaphor that runs throughout teleportasm to the point where it becomes very explicit. And I think that in many ways, at this point in time, at this point in history, it can kind of be seen as a parallel for the fentanyl addiction, because it's almost like people used to be happy with your classic drugs, even heroin, I have no experience with, but in its pure form, I understand is a relatively safe drug when, used properly, and when you're getting a product that you can depend on. And now fentanyl, all bets are off. And, it's a derivative of opioids, and not codeine, but morphine. Okay. And, I think, that metaphor, it's such an easy and apt metaphor right now, because, one of the things in teleportasm is that people start making copies, and the copies work but not as well. So the closer you get to one of the original tapes, the higher you get, so there are different levels of it. And with all these copies hitting the scene, you kind of get the parallel of fentanyl becoming the super cheap thing that gets you super high super fast. And then you kind of get this, you have these open air drug markets in some parts of the world that really seem almost like, Walking Dead, apocalyptic reality.
Shit. So I can imagine by this also being a horror novella, that there are some deaths that's going to take place.
Yeah, no one's safe. No, kids aren't safe. Cute little puppy dogs aren't safe. No one's safe. But that said, I think Teleportasm is a very bleak book, but I think it is very funny. It is a very gross book, but I think it is very funny. I tried to be as funny as I was gross, because I think that's what makes a successful horror comedy, is when you can balance those two things. You're going to forgive how far I go with the gore, because it's really set up in this place and with these characters that you're really going to like. And for a story that I think it's gonna draw you in, and it's gonna give you a great payoff.
Now, I understand we will be seeing, you were talking about gross, we are going to see some body horror in this.
Oh yeah, the Philadelphia experiment that we were talking about, people stuck in walls. You can think of that as the jumping off point for teleportasm. So it only gets worse from there.
Now, as a writer, do you ever? So we're in the whole PC culture now, but do you ever think when you're writing, I don't want to offend anybody?
Yeah, but I think I thought about that before PC culture, because I was raised right, and I think that people who use kind of like the basest words and the most inflammatory language are usually the least intelligent. So if I wanted to say something that I think some people might perceive as politically incorrect, I honestly think that I could find a way to say it that wouldn't be offensive, or that would be open to another side, or that would acknowledge the cultural context or whatever. For teleportasm, we had a sensitivity reader, and I'm glad we did. Because there are some things that I just didn't even realize. Like, for example, all the kids in junior high used to call me Spaz, because I used to get all upset all the time and stomp off in a huff. So I had this junior high character in Teleportasm who I called Spaz. The sensitivity reader points out to me that that's actually a slur for someone who's paraplegic in the UK. I didn't know that.
Really? I didn't know.
But calling someone a spaz is like something that would get bleeped, that would actually be absolutely be considered culturally offensive. A very, very base insult to people who have an affliction that doesn't affect their personality or their intelligence. So I was like, thank you very much. I absolutely want to take that out, because I don't want to offend everyone. And it's not because I'm PC. It's because I want to know what I'm saying. And if someone's going to point out to me something that they find offensive, I'm probably going to try to see eye to eye with them and, make my point anyway. I don't think there's anything I want to say with horror or gore that I couldn't say in a way that, would be that people wouldn't be offended by. And again, I'm not talking about it. We're talking about sort of like the woke thing, the PC thing. Hardcore Christians and people who object to anything rated above PG-13. Yeah, they might have a problem with it. They might be offended. And I don't give a shit about that.
But I mean, that's who I was asking about, because there's people out there who get offended by anything, and
like people who are offended by trigger warnings. I don't mind trigger warnings if that'll make a few people feel better and it doesn't hurt me. I don't think anyone's not going to read my book if it has a trigger warning on it. That's fine. Doesn't hurt me. It'll make a few people feel better, and my book is just as good with or without it.
Because I've heard people say, "Oh my goodness, he went too far with the gore. He went too far with the body horror. He went too far." But isn't that the point of horror? I mean, isn't horror supposed to be a little crude, a little unapologetic? It's supposed to be something that makes you go, "Ugh."
I think it still is. The blessing and the curse is that horror has gone mainstream. And what that means is, when you go for the core horror audience, you're trying to please a much bigger target audience than you were initially when it was a more niche, underground subculture. But that's not saying that same unapologetic horror doesn't exist. In literature, they call it splatterpunk. When people say, what's splatterpunk? I think the most succinct way you can describe splatterpunk is a baby in a blender. Whether that actually appears in the book or not, that's what splatterpunk is. So there absolutely is still that place for what people might think of as completely insensitive, but a lot of that is written by women or people who identify as women. So
I agree.
No matter what you're doing, you're not going to want to do certain things. You're not going to want to use certain dehumanizing language, but you can have characters who are vile and do, that's okay, because we must never forget that just because an author writes it, just because a character does it, doesn't mean that that's how the author thinks and believes. Authors create hideous characters. It's kind of that third person omniscient voice that I think is you shouldn't even have to try to not offend people who live other lifestyles or other socio-political. Why would you want to offend? If you're trying to offend, there's room for that too, but you're kind of moving outside of art and you're getting more into content where you just want to engage and enrage. There's a place for that too, but you kind of push that out of the artistic realm. There is a point where, if you just want to straight up be racist and sexist, go play with the other people who want to do that on the dark web.
Like, I'm a huge Quentin Tarantino fan, and some people ask me, say, "Oh, well, how can you be a Quentin Tarantino fan?" And he uses the N-word a lot, but it's in creativity. It's in that time. It's in that nature, and it's in that environment. It's just not being randomly tossed in it, and that's why I'm a huge Tarantino fan. But sometimes also too, using words like that, like it's helping to build a character, because you have this vile, disgusting character that as the audience you're supposed to dislike, and that character, sometimes you got to take that character up a notch.
Well, let me tell you about an experience I had recently, actually, and it's just a slight tangent. Occasionally I get acting gigs, and a couple of years ago I was offered a role of this kind of like adult film manager, real sleazy guy, and he runs across these foreigners who are hitchhiking across America, and they have a confrontation. And in the screenplay, they wanted me to use a racial slur directed at the Asian actor, And I said, I don't want to do that. And I said, look, Josh Millican hasn't been in enough film yet. If Leonardo DiCaprio wants to use that language, well, you can also look at some great things that Leonardo DiCaprio has done, and you can say, look, this person is a well-rounded actor. I've been in 4 or 5 films. If they do a story, if I got hit by a bus and they did the story of my life thing, I don't want that to be on the reel of my life. I said, you know what? I'll say something offensive, but I don't want to use a slur. I said, I'm a shitty character. I'm a shitty guy. I'm going to call the Asian character Jackie Chan because that's offensive, but it's not something that I'm going to be ashamed of. That is, especially in this digital world, it would live on forever. Me using a racial slur, I don't want to do that, if at all possible. I'm not Leonardo DiCaprio going for an Oscar. I never will be. So it's easy for me to just do my best to not even get into those situations. But, I'll take your word for it, when you talk about your appreciation for Quentin Tarantino, because I don't have your experience and I would never claim to understand it or speak for it.
Yeah. I'm a huge Tarantino fan. Now, okay, speaking about writing, as a writer, I ask this question a lot. Do you have, habits? Do you have a set time that you like to write? Do you have to write in a certain environment?
I mean, yes and no. There are definitely ideal times. As you can see, I have this nice little creepy office, and this is where I hide myself away from the outside world and get my stuff done. I find myself really productive in the mornings and in the evenings. So, if I had my druthers, I'd spend, from 9 to noon writing and then get to it again right after dinner. I'm a family man, as I mentioned earlier. So, obviously my family is the most important, and I can write wherever I am. I can squeeze it in wherever. But, ideally, I'd be in a nice, quiet place. Of course, I'd be enjoying some cannabis. I quit smoking, so I no longer do that, but I definitely enjoy my vapes and my herbs. And that's my ideal thing. But if I was traveling the world and all I had was my laptop and an airport, I'd write that way, and I did write that way when I was a journalist.
Speaking about being a journalist, you were a journalist for Dread Central for a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I started writing for Dread Central in about 2016, I think was the first time I submitted an article. I went from contributor to editor-in-chief. So, kind of to have gone from the first step position to the top rung position was quite a voyage. And maybe I'll tell that story sometime.
Awesome. All right. So, Joshua, as you know, this is a horror channel.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna do this. I do this every once in a while. I'm gonna ask you 3 random horror questions.
Love it. Bring it on.
All right. So last year for 420, I did my top 5 for marijuana themed horror movies.
Mm-hmm.
What are your top 3?
Top 3. One of them's probably Idle Hands. Devin Sawa and I are probably around the same age, and even though he's just doing an extension of the Cheech and Chong stereotype, when I saw Idle Hands, I felt seen. In the 1990s, when it was still illegal anywhere you went, when it was still kind of like the hippie burnout stereotype, which Anton definitely is in Idle Hands, I still felt seen. Number 2, 420 Massacre by Dylan Reynolds. I think it's on Tubi. And that is about these feminists, I guess, who go out in the woods to just enjoy some marijuana on 420. So it's also a perfect 420 movie. Now that actually gets into, it's a great movie, send up of old slashers, things like that. But it gets into a really dangerous part of the cannabis industry, which is guerrilla grow operations on federal land. So, these women get high, they go wandering off, they find they're in this marijuana field, right? And they're picking them and they love it. But of course, it's not just an abandoned field. You've got these serious growers out there and you're messing with their product and their livelihood. So they might just want to kill you rather than letting you leave the woods. And there are so many places to hide you in the woods that no one will ever find you again. Great premise. Also goes kind of to the serious side, like I mentioned. Number 3, it could probably fluctuate, all over the place, but I'll just say Color Out of Space, the recent Richard Stanley film. And when I say recent, I'm talking about, maybe 5 years ago. stars Nicolas Cage and a bunch of other great actors. Tommy Chong is in that movie playing the stoner stereotype, but the evolved stoner stereotype. He literally plays the wise man out in the woods, the hermit, and people go to find him and seek out his advice. And his wisdom comes from the fact that he's so connected to the earth and just the cycles of nature and time, that he really has everything figured out. And he speaks in a certain poetry, which I think is another thing that people don't give cannabis aficionados credit for. We have great linguistic capabilities. We speak wonderfully. So, color out of space. The cannabis aspect of it is small, but I think it's poignant, and that would be my 420 triple lineup feature.
Love it. Second question: what iconic horror villain would you like to smoke with?
Oh, jeez, who would I like to smoke with? I'd like to smoke with. I mean, that was the first one who popped in my mind. Leslie Vernon from Behind the Mask, just because he's so funny. And I actually have met Nathan Bassell. He is a really wonderful guy, and I actually have sat around and have conversations with him. And while I'd love to sit down and have another conversation with him, when you asked me that question, I was absolutely thinking about the character, not the actor, just because that guy is so funny, and I would love to be stoned with that guy and also a little bit scared the whole time. I smoke so much cannabis that I never get that like overwhelmed feeling. You know how like when you first start smoking cannabis, or your friend, they're like, "Oh, I'm so high, maybe I need to go to the hospital or something." You're like,
"No, have a heart attack." That's what I felt like. I feel like I was having a heart attack.
Sit down on the couch and have a panic attack and get over it. So, it's all fun. I don't even know what we were talking about now because I've been vaping the whole movie.
The final question. And everybody has their top best horror movie of all time, and everybody said, I'm pretty sure you have people who have said, "Oh my God, this horror movie is so great," and numerous people have said it, and you've watched it, and you're like, "I don't see it." What's that one that you're like, I don't understand why everybody loves this one so much?
That's a good question. I guess I would say the original Suspiria. I quite enjoyed the 2018 remake of Suspiria. I found myself really engaged with it. So when I was doing my research for that film, and of course I went back to the beginning, I didn't connect with the Dario Argento Suspiria, which so many people say is influential. However, Giallo is probably one of my least favorite subgenres. I understand that people love it, and I understand why people love it, and I absolutely understand that there's a so what, who cares attitude to the filmmaking over there, where it's like, oh, this is crazy, and we're just gonna put it in, and fuck you, and like a lot of people really love that. I'm a huge fan of meticulously crafted cinema, which is also why I don't love found footage films. I could have said the Blair Witch Project, but I'm glad I didn't, because that'll get my ass kicked. So, yeah,
I love Blair Witch. Yeah. I love Blair Witch.
It's good.
It is. Okay. Joshua, where can everyone find you, my friend?
Basically on Twitter and Instagram. On Twitter, it's at Josh_Millican, and Instagram, it's at Joshua_Millican, and that'll help you keep up to date on everything I'm doing. I've got a few convention appearances coming up. I'm going to be doing a few readings if you're in California and want to catch me in person. And I've got another book coming out in November, a novelization. So maybe I'll come back then and talk to you about it.
Sweet. Now, which conventions are you? By the way, I'm a huge horror convention guy. I go to
all
across the country. Which ones are you going to in California?
The first one I'm going to, not this weekend, but next week. I guess it won't matter when you hear this, but Sinister Creature Con in Sacramento. It is a small convention, but it gets some really great participants, some really great guests. I used to live in Northern California, and I used to love going to this small convention that had an absolute community feel. Sacramento, in terms of Northern California, Sacramento has a better horror scene than San Francisco. And you might think, oh, that's crazy. Horror heads in San Francisco. And it's like, not so much. But, Sacramento, absolutely. So my buddies run that convention. I'm going to have a table there. I'm actually going to read a chapter from TELEPORTASM before it's even released. So people can come and check me out doing that on June 23rd in Sacramento, Sinister Creature Con. And then I'm actually going to be doing a couple panels at Midsummer Scream. If you're a convention guy, I'm sure you know it. It's in Long Beach. It's one of the biggest ones from in California. It's an offshoot of Scare LA that seems to have sort of surpassed Scare LA in that convention's reach. And I'm going to be doing a panel about novelizations, since I've written 2 novelizations at this point. And I'm also going to be moderating a panel on AI and whether or not we should all be as scared of AI as we think. And I'm going to have a couple filmmakers with differing point of views on it. And we're also going to have an actual AI expert, a doctor from UCLA, who's going to be on the panel to keep everything grounded. Let us know how scary AI really is and what we should really be afraid of.
Oh, see, I would love to hear that, because, you know, a lot of indie horror filmmakers and authors are getting terrified about AI.
Yeah, man. And I don't blame them. You know, I think that it's absolutely fine to have zero tolerance. You know, it seems like in the indie publishing industry right now, there's a zero tolerance, and I'm fine with that. You know, in filmmaking, a lot of people are arguing for, you know, certain cases this and certain cases that. They're saying things about budget and equal access to, you know, certain technologies that'll give aspiring filmmakers the same effects as people with studio access. So, you know, I'm not quite sure how I feel about that yet. You know, but I'm interested in seeing how it all evolves.
Yeah, I am too. Joshua, this has been an absolute blast to have you on, man.
You know,
this is a fun conversation.
It's been really fun, man. I know that we were only planning on doing this for like half an hour, and we did it for like 40 minutes because, you know, we just got into it. But yeah, man, I have a feeling that even if we weren't live streaming and recording it, that you and I could just talk for a few hours.
Listen, man, I know I'm going to be in California. I want to say it's either September or October.
You gotta, we gotta hook up. I got my own place. I'll bring you up to the haunted attic. We'll enjoy some cannabis. We'll have some fantastic times. You better hit me up when you're in.
I'm gonna be in LA and San Diego, so I'll definitely.
Fantastic, man. Fantastic. Well, I look forward to seeing you in person.
Most definitely. All right, everybody. Thank you for coming to the Horror Room. I'm Travis Bruce, and that is Joshua Millican. I said it right? Millican?
You got it, man.
Bam. Okay, good. All right, we'll see you next time. Take care.
All right, man. I had a ton of fun. Thanks, Travis.